We all harbor biases, including racial biases. They've been built into our brains by evolution and can often interfere with our decision-making and actions. Joining us now to shed some light on what we can do to combat our biases, here's Shakil Choudhury. He is author of Deep Diversity, Overcoming Us versus Them. Good to have you back here in our studio. How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you for having me back, Steve.
Well, the funny thing is the first paragraph of your book, you say that you spent your childhood pretending that you were white.
That's right.
Now, this just in, you're not white. So why did you do that?
Well, it's interesting. It's not something that I consciously thought of. It wasn't something that I even could name or articulate until well into my 20s, but it wasn't until I rewound the old beta tapes in my head to realize that I actually spent a lot of my childhood wanting to be like everybody else, which is what lots of young people do, except that when we come from minority communities, that can have an extra layer on it. And for me, that meant fitting in meant acting like everybody else and being like everybody else. That meant my South Asian ethnicity, my Muslim heritage that I was brought up in. All of that was stuff I didn't have anything to do with. I just put it to the side.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in small town of Hanover, Ontario.
And I guess everybody in Hanover was white.
Predominantly.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So you wanted to be like them?
Yeah, except the fact that, that experience is still there today, and it's really complicated why that happens, but it's both young people and adults that I meet that come from non-white backgrounds have a very common experience with that if they've grown up here. And it almost doesn't matter where you grow up because of the society in which we live in is predominantly white. And so there's an impact of that.
How old were you when you first realized, I actually am not white and don't need to be white?
Well, I always kind of knew I wasn't, but that didn't mean I admitted to myself that I was acting a particular way. It wasn't until probably my mid-20s where I started realizing that I'd had these sort of like tensions inside of myself that I've been struggling with for a long time. I wasn't able to actually name those or articulate those because it's just not something that's ever talked about.
Now, because you look so damn young, I'm going to tell everybody that your mid-20s is actually more than 20 years ago.
Yes.
Okay. Just so they can put it into a time and a place.
That's right.
Let me do a quote here. Robert Jensen, in his book, The Heart of Whiteness, writes, "Race is a fiction we must never accept. Race is a fact we must never forget." What do you think he means here?
He means two things. One is that, first of all, technically there's only one race, the human race. And so the fact that we talk about white, black, brown, all of these different groups, that's in fact constructed by society. That is something that we've been socialized into seeing different races, when in fact there's just the human race. So that's what he's talking about on that front, that it's a fiction. In fact, there is more commonalities genetically between two people, or can be between two people, one who identifies as white and one as black, and you can have even more variance genetically between two white people or two black people. So genetically it doesn't really make sense. It only makes sense sort of socially in the ways that we have come to understand it.
It's interesting you say those who identify as white and those who identify as black rather than those who are white or are black. Because it's more complicated than that nowadays?
Of course it's more complicated. I mean, there's a way in which we can identify ourselves, but then there's also a way in which we get identified in society. So for example, historically, if you were Irish and Catholic, you were discriminated against. You were not considered white. White was white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And so just over time, that more and more people have been allowed into that group that's considered white, and that includes, groups that have been historically discriminated against, Southern Mediterranean, Italian, Greek, Portuguese, also were not considered white for a long time. They are today. If one identified as being Jewish, not considered white, more so today. So, but then there's other groups that haven't been allowed into that circle, and that's because visibly they're too far away from being white, and that's of course anyone who identifies as indigenous, people who identify as black and have roots many generations back, and so on and so forth.
Okay, let's start to unpack some of the themes of your book and some of the terms. For example, implicit bias. What do you refer to when you use that term?
Okay, implicit bias, what the research shows and refers to, is an unconscious form of prejudice that impacts our decisions automatically quickly and without our awareness. So just to illustrate what I mean by that, I was in an optometrist store getting new eyeglasses, and I needed to update my prescription, and the person behind the desk said, well, here's a local optometrist that you can go to get your eyes tested. I'm sorry, I was at an eyeglass store. And so here's someone we recommend, and handed me a business card. I looked at the business card, and it said, Abdeso Kien Far. And in my head, an automatic image appeared based on this foreign-sounding name. An older man, not particularly good with English, and musty old office somewhere. And I hesitated. And I initially was a little reluctant to make that call. Eventually, of course, I did. Now, here's the thing with that, is that I know absolutely that had that card that was handed to me, if it said Ellen Goldstein, Jack Wright, or any other Anglo-sounding name, I wouldn't have hesitated at all. And it's my hesitation is the issue, and that is exactly what is identified as our implicit bias, my implicit bias.
Where do you think it comes from?
It comes from socialization in society, and it's of course interesting too, because my name, Shakil Choudhury, would be considered foreign by many other people, and yet I'm also impacted by that because we're in the same society, same norms are at play. Now, what's really important to recognize is that our implicit bias, if we are not able to detect it, if we're not able to catch it early when the costs are low, in this case the cost was personal embarrassment and the fact that I'm sharing it with you, then under stress and time pressures, the consequences may be greater. So for example, I'm a doctor and I don't know that my biases are at play at this unconscious level, then I may undertreat patients, which is what a lot of the research shows. If I'm a police officer and I haven't recognized that I've got biases towards certain groups of people, I may use excessive force, and then tragedies, as we're seeing south of the border, because police officers are seeing, because they're stereotypes, threat and danger where there isn't any.
First of all, good for you for acknowledging this. You know, everybody's got it, so you don't look that silly admitting to it, right? I mean, you're just admitting that you're a human being, that's all.
That's right.
But what's, I guess what some people will find interesting about this is that we may have thought that this was a thing that only the majority in society could suffer from, that only, you know, the white Anglo-Saxon male could suffer from implicit bias. You are not part of that world, and yet you suffer from it as well. Is that a revelation that people who represent minority groups can also suffer from this?
It was when I started first doing this work and realizing that this is what the research shows. And in fact, again, this isn't what we say about ourselves consciously, it's about how we feel and react unconsciously. And absolutely, the data is that that's coming out of work from Project Implicit based out of Harvard. It says that basically, for example,
I got a clip on this.
Oh, you do?
Can we do this
okay,
right now?
so,
Well, because since you've hit on it, let's just play this right now.
Yeah, sure.
The implicit association test, developed
Right.
by the couple of Harvard researchers you just referred to. This is going back to the 90s. April 2007, the NBC program Dateline broadcast a story on this test.
Right.
Here's the clip from that. Let's roll it, please.
Left, right.
Once again, on the part of the test which associates black with good and white with bad, a white test taker flounders.
Right. I don't remember.
You held it together almost to the end.
Betseys' test shows a preference for white.
There would be many people who would say, what's wrong with showing a preference for your own race?
In some contexts, it's actually illegal to do so. In employment contexts, in college admissions.
Dennis is the leader of a civil rights organization. According to his test in the studio, Dennis is neutral. But his individual computer test showed a preference for white. His response?
All we had in images were whites through the type of media outlets that we were exposed to during my age generation. And that was a constant reinforcement over and over again.
Fascinating. So getting back to the question I asked earlier, how common is it that, say, blacks have an unconscious bias towards whites and away from blacks?
So, at least according to the data, when we looked at lots of these things of meta-analysis, is that I've read that up to 50% of black people have a pro-white, anti-black bias. 70% of whites, Latinos, and Asian Americans, Asian Canadians as well, have a pro-white, anti-black bias. So this is something that affects us, again, both consciously and unconsciously. And unconsciously is where we're having to deal with in society today, because that's what results in systemic discrimination and racism that is pervasive, but it's so subtle and hard to detect because vast majority of society, we see ourselves as well-intentioned, thoughtful, and people who care about fairness and justice. And that's true. And yet, the gaps exist in all organizations and all institutions, and a big part of it is the fact that we just don't know that there's unconscious bias at play.
Okay, you have pointed out already that socialization is much of the explanation behind this.
That's right.
And yet, I'm going to read a quote from your book where we talk about brains, you talk about the evolution in our brains.
That's right.
So let's do that. A perceived threat by the amygdala can set off the body's fight, flight, freeze mechanism. Say that quickly 3 times. The automatic response easily overpowers the thinking part of our brain. In this state, we become very reactive. This can work in our favor and help us, for example, jump out of harm's way from a snake, say. But it also has drawbacks. For example, the amygdala can misfire when we interact with those who are different from us. It has been shown to be activated when we relate to those of a different race. We don't seem to have an equally strong automated response mechanism for positive inputs. The result is a tendency to judge members of other racial groups unfairly. So can implicit bias training subvert evolution in order to overcome the racism you're talking about?
It's such a good question. I would say that, so one is that there's the research showing that we have a hardware in place to basically define tribe, define who is part of our group, who's part of our in-group, and that happens at like under 12 months of age. We're finding that babies are more reactive to people who share the same race as their caregivers, the same gender as their caregivers, the same language and accent group as their caregivers. So it's really, really young that we have this ability. Now, who the us and them is, who my tribe is, that's all socialization. And what's important to recognize is that we can't change the hardware so much, but we can change the software. And we've been trying to change the software for generations. So for example, and successfully so. So for example, anti-slavery movements were trying to change the software. Women's suffrage, the right to vote, was trying to change the software.
But you don't want to change all the hardware either, right? I mean, you do want to be afraid of that snake and make sure you don't get bit.
Exactly. So we can't actually change the hardware, but we keep evolving the software. So civil rights and human rights have been evolving the software. And right now, we're at a stage where we're actually recognizing how unconscious things are. And I think that is the next element, the 2.0 that we're needing to evolve socially to help us advance. And I think so there's hope, is what I would say.
Having said that, are you concerned that there will be an attempt by some people to use the racial biases built into us since evolutionary times as a justification for their racism?
Some people will, sure. The vast majority of people won't. The vast majority of people that I work with are, and I work with organizations. I've been doing so for 20 years, working with people and organizations, and what I find is people become very relieved. They're like, "Oh, really? You mean all of us are impacted by this?" And so people are actually more willing to talk about bias and prejudice and discrimination today in a way that they weren't even 5 or 10 years ago.
Is there anything that's happened in the 2015 Canadian election that has made you reconsider any of what you've just said?
It's such a great point. So obviously issues like the niqab have evoked a deeply emotional response in people. And here's the thing, is that what the research shows is that people we believe to be part of our outgroups, people that we perceive to be racially different than us, we register them more. Our brain registers them more as objects rather than people. So as a result, mistreating people, not being more harsher on them, all that kind of stuff plays out. Now, when the issue of niqab, the way it's been raised by the Canadian federal government, which to me I think is outrageously irresponsible, is actually evoking all of that. Whether they know the science or not, they intuitively know that this will evoke a reaction. And for all of us, what I think is really important to recognize is that we will fall prey to our biases unless we actually are aware that that tendency is there. That tendency to go us, them is very, very quick. It's automatic. But if we can go, actually, this may happen to me because I'm human, I'm like everybody else. So who's trying to manipulate me and why and for what gain? And so I really invite people to look at that and say, you know what, for the number of people that we're looking at here, 2 women have required this accommodation, which is a totally legitimate accommodation. In the 4 years it's been enacted as this strange, bizarre law. However, you know, the government wants to talk about that, but not about the 1,200 murdered and missing Aboriginal women. To me, that not just smells of politics, it smells of prejudice and racism.
Okay, let's turn the cameras around at you then.
Yeah.
Because you went through this, right? 2007, you did the implicit association test.
That's right.
So you put the focus, you put the spotlight on yourself.
That's right.
To find out about your own biases.
That's right.
What'd you find out?
I found something very shocking, that when I did the test that looked at race, white and black, that I had a moderate pro-white, which means I had an anti-black bias. And my work is all about...
Does it mean that? Let me just stop you there. Does it mean if you've caught yourself, as you put it, in a pro-white
That's right.
thinking,
That's right.
is that necessarily anti-black?
It is. It is. According to this test, it is, right? In terms of that, because we're comparing black and white. So if you're pro-white, you're going to be anti-black in terms of that. Doesn't mean it comes out as neutral. Now, you can have a reading that's neutral too, which means that you're actually able to, your bias is neither for nor against. But if you're pro-white, it does mean you're anti-black in terms of the unconscious level. That doesn't mean that's what we're thinking or believing, or that this is how I treat people necessarily. But it does reveal at this unconscious processing level that if push comes to shove, I may react in a particular way. So for me, I discovered that, and I was shocked, because this is my work. This is my life's work. And so, you know, one of my things, besides reconsidering what I'm doing as a career, was to then start looking at, well, can we do anything about this? Can we change this? And right now, there are some strategies that are emerging that are promising strategies.
Well,
that
before you
can
get
help
there,
us.
don't go there yet, because I've
Okay.
got a few more things I want to get to first. So does that mean if I love the Leafs, I necessarily hate the Canadians?
Not necessarily, but some people do.
Well, I'd be one of them. Okay. A subway commute.
That's right.
Tell us how that plays into all of this.
Right. So what I was saying was that I was distressed trying to figure out, I've got this anti-black bias. And then on one level that kind of makes sense, because as I told you, I grew up wanting to be white, so the fact that I'm pro-white makes sense, right, at this unconscious
You were
level.
socialized that way.
Socialized
in
that
your
way. In
youth.
fact, the vast majority of people in society would have a pro-white unconscious bias. Now, I came across research that was really interesting, and they talked about counter stereotypes, the idea that we can actually relearn certain things and reprogram our brain a little bit. And so right now, the stereotype that many of us are working with in society, which is an anti-black stereotype, associates black with dangerous, black with criminality. And that becomes a shortcut in our brain, a heuristic. Black evokes this, and it tends to be negative. Well, we can actually take that and turn it around and turn it into something else, but it requires conscious effort and conscious awareness. So what I did was I basically learned that we can use counter stereotypes, and I applied them. So this is what the research shows, and I did it in my practice, is that anytime I was in a subway car and I saw, and I was around people who were black, I would basically close my eyes and in my head create an image and just start creating positive associations. So I would say black, engineer, hardworking, generous, professor, and I would just repeat this. And if I had 3 or 4 people, I would use that. I would use that activity to learn a new neural pattern. And about 5 years later, as I was writing this book, I went back and redid the test. And this test is pretty consistent. You'll do it over and over again. You get more or less the same results because it's a speed test. It is at this unconscious level. And what I found was that my level of bias had reduced. It was to a low or no level of bias.
So you trained yourself to have less implicit bias.
That's right. Now, this is one of the strategies that we can implement, and the concern that researchers have is that it's kind of elastic. Like if we do it, how long will it stay? So far, that's still an area of research that people are looking at, and the best research I've seen so far is that, you know, by doing anti-bias training, that it can have an impact. And so there are promising results that last, you know, at least 3 months or beyond. And so it's a new area of research, so we don't have the answers to yet, but there is some promising strategies for sure.
I want to ask you about someone named Francine LeMay.
That's right.
Who's she?
Francine LeMay is the sister of Marcel LeMay, and Marcel LeMay was the police officer that was shot at the Oka crisis way back in 1990.
25 years ago.
That's right. So, and I talk about her in my book because sometimes the impacts of racism, sometimes the impact of discrimination and hate can result in tragedies. And in this case, because of this confrontation between Indigenous people who are trying to protect their land and the police force and the town, that there was a tragedy and a police officer died. No one ever determined where that came from, but that's separate to the story. Francine LeMay, she basically was asked many years afterwards, how she felt about this crisis, and without any training in anti-bias, all this kind of stuff, she actually paused. And when she was asked this question, she didn't know how to answer it, so she went and started educating herself. Like, how did she feel about the Oka crisis? She was embarrassed. She didn't really have an opinion, even though her brother had died. And yet she went and as she started looking at some of the work, she realized the incredible amount of racism faced by the Mohawk people in Oka historically, as well as contemporary times, and she realized that she had never known that part of the story. So what she did was she started educating herself and built relationships and connections with that community. And she did that because she had a really generous spirit, is how I would read it, and two, because she paused. She didn't just react, and a lot of us just react. And so I used her story as an example of what white people can also do in this conversation around racism, even when the stakes are high. She lost a brother's life in something, and she would have a lot of reason to dislike Native people. And I also share a story too where I talked about an Indigenous elder that I met from Grassy Narrows, and the crisis of his life and the tragedies that he's faced, and how he was also able to work through that as an example of where non-white people, Indigenous people, racial minorities also have a different path. So some of our path is together because we all have unconscious bias, but in looking at issues of race and difference, some of our path is a little bit different, and we need to be able to work with that and acknowledge that.
What were the, I don't know if it's too early to come to any long-term conclusions or understand the ramifications of what Francine LeMay did. Do we know that yet, what the long-term positive consequences, or negative for that matter, of what she tried?
Well, what she tried to do was just really important. Once she learned this history and realized she didn't know any of this history, and she built this connection with the Mohawks of Oka, as her way of giving back to the community, she actually translated this history of the Mohawk people from Oka that was only available in French and was like a self-published thing. She translated, she's a translator by profession. And to me, that's a great act of trying to influence people, because she basically said, I'm realizing that my friends also carry these stereotypes, my family carry these stereotypes, and here's what I can do to affect that. I can take this history that is written by the Mohawk people about their experiences, not history written by someone else looking in, and translate that and help out. So I don't know the long-term consequences of that, but to me, I'd say that that's a really important act, because sometimes the most important people that we can influence, sometimes the only people we can influence besides ourselves, is the people closest to us. I think that's what she was doing, so I think that's a really important thing.
Great. Shakil, our last minute here, we all know the golden rule.
That's right.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
That's right.
What's the platinum rule?
The platinum rule, in terms of looking at issues of diversity and inclusion, is to treat people how they would like to be treated, which is a little bit different, because sometimes that means we have to adapt. And so that's a rule that I think is really important.
A little bit of a spin on the golden rule.
That's right.
Platinum's worth more than gold, right? So you think this is a better rule?
This is generally accepted as a better rule because it allows us to not treat everybody equally, because sometimes treating everybody the same is not treating them fairly. That we treat people according to their needs. So everyone doesn't need 2 sandwiches. Some people only need half sandwich, some people need 6, because that's what their needs are. So our idea is that we work with people where they are, and that's really what democracy is about, is helping people from the margins who are sometimes left out to be part of the center, and that sometimes means we need more in some areas and less in others.
Thanks, Shakil.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Deep Diversity is the name of the book. Overcoming Us versus Them, Shakil Choudhury. Great to have you back here at TVO.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.